Hello, everyone. Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to remind you that my book, Drummers on Drumming, is available now on Amazon as both a paperback and an ebook. Based on the Big Fat Five segment of this podcast, where I sit down with my favorite drummers to discuss the 5 records and stories that shaped their approach to the instrument, this book is packed with insights from the drummers who redefined how we think about the modern drum set. You can grab your copy now by checking the link in this episode's show notes or simply searching Drummers on Drumming on Amazon. So thank you for all the support, and now let's get into the show. Welcome back to, I think we're calling it the drum panel. I mean, we have a graphic and everything else, right, Eric?
Yeah, it's settled, I think.
Yeah, so hello, I'm Ben. I'm here with Eric Urea, and we have Chris Mazzarisi on the podcast today, who is my boss, my friend, the founder, owner of Big Fat Snare Drum. How's it going, Chris?
Please emphasize boss more than friend, please. Thank you.
Yes, no, I said that first. But let's just hop into these controversial drum topics. And for those of you who listened to the first episode, there's so many. I think we only got to like 6 of them, Eric. We'll see how many we get through today. This might be split into 2 episodes. We'll go with Eric. I'll make you answer this first. So this is more of a statement. 2 statements I put together in one. Practicing with a metronome makes playing sterile. Being a metronome is great if you want to be a session musician your whole life, but unless you want to have feel, you're replaceable by a guitarist with a MIDI file.
Oh, I could not disagree more with this take. I feel like to properly play with the metronome, it's the same skill as playing with anything, whether it's another percussionist or a guitar player. You have to groove within the parameters of something else's timing. So whether or not it's a metronome or a guitar player or a bass player, your groove should still exist, and the metronome isn't going to make your playing sterile unless you're not comfortable grooving within something else's timing.
Yeah. What about you, Chris?
My take on it is the metronome is just a tool. I think it's a necessary tool at this point. Bands that play to backing tracks, bands that just want a consistency, things I guess like production, mixes, everything just kind of relies on the click right now. I don't think it makes you sterile. I think you need to practice with it so much that it just becomes kind of second nature. I know personally in my in-ear mix, my click, it's like hard to explain, but the way it sits in my mix, it doesn't even feel like it's in my ears. It feels like it's in my head.
Because Probably it's so loud, or because it's just mixed so well within the song?
I think just the way it's mixed and probably how loud it is within my mix. But the cool thing is, it's just you practice to it enough and you play to it enough live, it just disappears. And that actually I think freaks me out more than anything during a show. When I'm like, is my mix weird? Are my ears clogged? Are my in-ears broken? Because the click is just gone because you're playing.
Am I having a stroke?
I haven't thought of that, but that's probably going to go into my revolving repertoire in my brain now.
Oh,
I'm having a stroke during the show. But I guess that's the goal. So I mean, is it the most fun thing to do? Is sit with a pad and practice with metronome? Probably not. But I think it's a necessary thing to work up to the point of then when you're playing live shows or in the studio, the click disappears and makes your band stronger, makes you a stronger player.
Yeah, I think we all disagree with this because I think what this person means wrongly is that practicing to a click means you will play metronomically. It's not like if I play to a click on the quarter note, all my 16th notes are going to be perfect. It's just kind of like what you said, Eric, where you're going to have to play to someone else, and maybe that's not a click, but it's something you have to be externally listening to and following along with, whether it's the same or not the same. So I think getting used to listening to something and telling you where you should be is not the worst thing in the world. It's amazing. I wonder, though, is there an app where, maybe Benny Greb's thought of this, but where you can set the metronome and be like plus or minus 7 BPM, and you practice along to it, but it's like kind of varies a little bit? That would actually be better practice, I think, Yeah, this is interesting. Those who can't teach. A lot of these drummers are not in a position to be offering lessons. Chris, I'll go for you first.
I will say that the online teaching community has definitely changed because a lot of the guys that are kind of the top people to look at are guys that are actually out there gigging or have had some pretty big gigs. So they are bringing some real life experience to it. I don't know. I mean, I think that's kind of a mean thing to say.
Yeah. Like those who can't teach, the first part?
Yeah, I mean, some people really do enjoy teaching. And I mean, are they going to be going out on tour and like sleeping in a van and playing, clubs throughout the United States just to prove a point? Probably not, but I mean, they're still stoked about what they're doing, and they're bringing the next generation. Maybe that one of their students is going to be a huge drummer.
Yeah.
There's definitely a shift in what's going on right now, and I think the people who are kind of the top people to look at are people that have been involved in the industry in some aspect. I'm thinking of like the Davey Liches and Mike Johnsons. Those guys really were out there grinding, playing with real bands, real world applications of what they're teaching. I think that's what people would really want. Yeah, I think you want kind of like come from a genuine place of, this is why you should play this part, this is why you should do this, because I've been out there and I've done it. Like, you don't want to have 17,000 fills, you want to just lay it down in a rock band. Some kind of real world explanation of why I'm showing you this thing. Take it seriously because I kind of know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, yes, I would choose a drummer with more experience, but a lesser player than someone who was just technically amazing. But I guess it's like, maybe go to both of those teachers. Like, you don't have to have one drum teacher. So,
yeah,
what about you,
I
Eric?
think it's a tricky one. I think that the people who stick with teaching honestly do it because they love it. I do a lot of touring, and when I'm not on tour, teaching is what fills in the gaps for me.
Awesome.
But at the end of the day, like, I do it because I like doing it, and I think even if I was in the biggest band in the world, I would still be teaching in some capacity. I get a lot of fulfillment out of it, and frankly, I learn a lot about my own playing through teaching. Mm-hmm. But with that said, I recognize that it's not for everybody. And especially during the pandemic, I watched a lot of colleagues go like, okay, I'm going to try teaching now. And then quickly realized that it was like, it's not a thing that you can casually go into. It is, it is a very specialized skill. So I think saying like, those who can't do teach minimizes how much skill teaching takes as like as its own entity.
Yeah, a lot of times people don't factor in that life happens, and sometimes even though you want to be a touring drummer, life happens, and you can't do that anymore. So you still love the drums, you want to be a part of the community, and you decide to teach. And even if you're not the best teacher or don't feel like you're the best teacher, I don't ever want to discourage anyone from trying to make money doing drums if that's what they need to do.
Well, in my mind, too, it ties in a little bit to what we talked about with social media on the last thing, where, again, I think people go into things like this with a strictly gigging mindset. So, like, Mike Johnson is a great example. I don't know him personally, but I really admire that he talks about how he doesn't like touring and that he quit touring because he likes to teach. Like, teaching is what he does. I super appreciate that perspective to like actively be like, you know what, I can tour, but I'm not going to because I like to teach. So I think that in itself disproves this whole concept.
Well, and also I do have a few students, and I wouldn't say that I'm the best teacher, nor do I exemplify when I watch myself the best technical player. But I think a lot of my students, all of them actually, are a fan of what I do when I play live, and they want to get what I'm cooking up with, whether that's a shitty meal or not. You don't always have to be the guy that has the right answer. Just like, this is what I do, and if it makes you excited and inspired, this is what I do. Take with it. There's so much information out there. It's not like you're teaching them something and they have no way to triple check your work. It's like, if I teach you something and then you never get better if you disagree with me, that's kind of on you. That got really aggressive there. But yeah, I think you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I taught drum lessons once to one student and actually got the gig from a guy from Reflex and Zildjian. It was to teach Riz Ahmed for the movie The Sound of Metal. And I've never been so scared and so just second guessing everything about myself trying to teach. It just, like you were saying before, Eric, it's just, if you don't have that muscle and you don't know what you're doing, it's not good. I mean, I just basically taught him how to just look cool playing drums. And I was like, I don't look cool playing drums. I don't know if I could teach you that, but I think it turned out okay.
Oscar-nominated movie.
Yeah, Oscar nominated.
Sound of Metal, by the way. And I believe, actually, Chris, I'm not sure if maybe we talked about it on Guy's episode, but there's a few of the scenes where maybe when it's like an establishing shot from a distance when he's in the bus and he's playing drums, like get some aggression out. That's actually audio of you playing drums, right?
That is, yeah. I was just I was playing Glassjaw and Thursday licks, and they just rolled tape on it. So
That's
that
incredible.
is amazing. Yeah, dude. All right, so this one is from Questlove, and we'll see what you guys have to say. We do love you, Questlove. Let's just say that right out in the open. But he said, less drums tells me what you're really made of. Eric, go first.
Oh, man.
What do you think of what Questlove said? Eric, you go first.
Jeez, sweating just profusely. Yeah, I want to apologize first off for not answering his question on the very first episode. I feel like we snubbed Questlove, and that is not a position I want to be in.
It's pretty alpha,
but no,
if you ask me.
I always say limitation breeds creativity. So I totally agree. I think when you have less things in front of you, it really just kind of test your ability to be creative in that moment. So if someone drops you into a gig and all you have is kick, snare, hat, that's a stressful situation, I think, for anybody. But you have to work with those tools and be creative within those parameters. That's going to be your ultimate test.
Yeah, whenever I have too many toms, I actually think that, I'm actually way less creative. Just in general, like, I am overwhelmed with all the options for, like, tom fills that I end up, like, just using my snare more than I would if I had two tom. You know what I mean? What's your vibe, Chris?
I'm kind of a weird drummer because I've played the same setup, I think, for probably 30 plus years now. I've never varied from it. Just rack, floor, snare, two crashes, ride hats. I'm even just so kind of a stickler even with cymbal sizes. The last couple of years I've switched sizes, which was really uncomfortable for me, and it took me a second to get used to it. With that being said, when I break out and try to do even a more simplified setup, I can't wrap my brain around it. I understand what he's saying, and I do agree with it. Just me personally, I don't think I could be any more creative with less. I think I'm pretty much at like a point of, this is what I need. This is the tools I need to be as creative as I possibly can. I think for me, stripping it down, I would probably be worse. But I think I'm just a weird drummer. But I totally see, just from teching for so many years and working for drummers where we'd have like a radio show or a fly day, and it would be like a really stripped down acoustic kit or like a cajon and some like weird percussion stuff. I totally see where the creativity can come from a different place just by stripping down your setup and just kind of thinking out of the box and using some different instruments that you normally would have. I know I worked for Josh Day for a really long time, and he's a really excellent example of that, where he would just, play cajon and play some weird tambourines, play some stuff with his feet, some shakers, and just really bring the song to life in a totally different way than, playing a traditional drum kit through a PA.
You touched on something interesting, though, and now I'm curious to hear your perspective too, Ben. If you got dropped into a Cannon's gig with just kick, snare, hat, would you be worse?
I'd probably sound better to the audience. I would definitely make the song sound better. I would. Well, here's the thing, actually. So, we played Lollapalooza 2 weekends ago, humble brag, and we had 3 gigs. We had the after party the first night, and then we had it's just called the after party, but it was just after the Lollapalooza. But before our actual gig at Lollapalooza, next day we played Lolla, and then the third night we played Soho House, and they wanted a not full band but not fully acoustic set, and we're like, okay. So we had basically just distorted or a electric guitar, electric bass, Michelle singing, and then I brought a KT10 kick trigger, and then a PDA and a real hi-hat. So all I actually had was, by all intents and purposes, a kick, snare, and hat. And it was probably one of the most fun gigs we've played, because we didn't play to a click, because clicks make you sterile. We all know that. And so I actually had more fun doing it. I just had to channel, is it Chris Isaac? The, I don't want to fall in love.
Wicked Game?
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I had to do that. But did it make me more creative? Maybe not. But did it make me more tasteful and allow for more space? Yeah. That was really long-winded. Sorry.
No, it's just an interesting concept because I was so on board with agreeing, and then Chris mentioned if you took away a bunch of your stuff, you would play worse. And I kind of feel the same. I think I would play worse I play a pretty small setup as well, generally speaking. Standard 4-piece, 2 crashes, ride hi-hat.
I mean, I would say, like, the optimistic buddy to both you guys, if you were to tell me that, I would want to respond with, like, fine, yeah, you might feel like the first few times you want to do your traditional instinctual stuff, it might be weird, and you might do a shitty open hi-hat, and like, it sounds like crap, but then you've already committed to it. Then the next time you wouldn't do it. I would say maybe if you were forced to do it by the 3rd gig, I think you would be more creative, and you would try things like, oh my gosh, if I don't hit a crash cymbal going into the chorus, the world doesn't end. If the hi-hat doesn't get bigger during the chorus, it still elevates it because like the chords change. So I would say I think you guys believe what you're saying, but I don't think what you're saying is true. And on that, I started this because I did want to say, Questlove, I love you, but I'm going to go on the record and I might get fired by Chris for saying this, but I don't necessarily agree with that sentiment, and I think it is gatekeeping a little bit, because I think that there are some people that don't want to speak the way that Questlove does, and sometimes the stuff that you feel impelled to say only works in this language, i.e.
That is true.
Drum kits that are more melodic, and the way you want to express yourself. So to say less drums, tell me what you're really made of, obviously I know exactly what he's talking about, but I feel that sometimes that's not the case at all.
I think that guy can make anything work. So I think
I think I agree.
He wants to do.
Me.
Moving on, someone said no pillows or blankets in the kick drum. Learn how to tune. I'll go first on that. I haven't gone first yet. Shut up. You know what I mean? Like you sound ignorant. There's no way that every genre can handle a wide open kick drum. You know, what's still really hard to make it, even if you have a kick drum that has a pillow in it, to tune that in a way that can still be punchy but have the decay you want. That's hard. So it's all you're learning how to tune. I want to see a person tune the way like you want a beefy kick drum. Make it so I can bury my beater, which 90% of drummers do, and make it sound beefy and still have tone. Do that. I'm sure that person might not be able to do it right away. So, all right, I'm done.
Yeah, I don't think those are mutually exclusive. That was you're right on. I think you should learn how to tune, and then
be a good drummer, get shitty, and welcome to the club. So, what do you think, Chris?
So I will say this. So I started really playing drums and kind of cutting my teeth in the Long Island hardcore scene. So those were kind of VFW hall shows, smaller backyard shows, and obviously no mics on anything, so my kick drum needed to be as loud as possible. So would I put anything in there? No. I literally would have, this is like pre, EMAD or whatever the Remo version of that is, just clear heads and just slam the kick drum as hard as I can to make it hurt. And then I kind of continued that playing in some like pop punk bands and thinking same thing, like I just need to have my kick drum as loud as possible. But now I'm like, all right, we're playing shows where stuff's getting mic'd, and the sound guys are like, what are you doing, dummy?
Yeah.
That sounds terrible. Like I can't mix this. You need to put something in there. And I think I'm kind of in the in-between. I have very little in my kick drum. I do use an Evans EMAD, and I have one of the Evans pillows in there. And then I do like a little t-shirt on the Rezo head. So it's still pretty open, but it's not there's not nothing in there. And I think I agree with Eric. There's definitely an in-between there. First learn how to tune and then figure everything else out, For me also too, I think a big part of a bass drum is the feel. Kind of the feel before the tune, which I know sounds weird, but it's just, your front of house guy, if he's a decent front of house mixer and you have some decent mics in there, he can make your kick drum sound fine. I really like the feel. So my kick drum kind of has a tendency to be a little tighter probably than most, just because I like to bounce back, and I do bury the beater like 90% of the people out there. So,
and I'll say this: I've seen Winnetka play a lot, and I think your drum tones, your kick drum, everything sounds amazing. Your snare, obviously, because you're using big fat snare drum products, but your kick always sounds good. But I will say, like, when I go in the room to Matt's studio, your kick drum is not how I would tune my kick drum in just like from sitting behind it, but that feels good to you through the front of house. It sounds incredible. So it just goes to show that sometimes something that just sounds foreign to me also works just as good, if not better. So we all have our own thing, but yeah, the kick drum's going to sound good.
Yeah, you have to have a pretty terrible front of house guy, pretty terrible PA, pretty terrible microphone to make a kick drum sound bad. I mean, I've seen bands where it's just like there's no front head on it. There's a giant pillow in there. There's like one microphone that's 7 feet away, and it still sounds amazing.
All right, well that one was good. Way to go, boys. How about this one? Drums tune themselves.
I don't know where to begin with that, to be honest.
I have a little idea, and unless, Chris, you want to go first.
I mean, I partially agree with that in a weird way. So the way I actually tune especially on toms, I tune the reso head to the tone of the shell. That's how I tune it. So I will literally strike with a stick the side of the shell, get the tone of the drum, tune the bottom reso head to that. And then I feel like the top head, for the most part, has a sweet spot where it sits with that drum. So I think I kind of agree with that statement in a weird way. I think the drums do tune themselves. I think you can't take a 10-inch rack tom and make it sound like a 14-inch rack tom. It's just not going to happen. There are limitations, and I think that's based on the construction of the shell, the kind of material, the hardware, the heads, all that kind of stuff, the way you play the drum, where you attack it. Yeah, I think I kind of weirdly agree with that. That's just my personal tuning. Yeah, like I said, I do tune the reso head to the actual shell tone, and then wherever the top head, and kind of goes back to what I was saying about the bass drum in a previous discussion we just had. I kind of like, kind of where it feels first, and then I kind of get the sound. Where
did you learn that?
I really got into using the drum dial for a while. I do. It's funny. It's like when I teched for so many years, and I was so meticulous about tuning, especially with the drum dial. I would literally, the artist I've always worked for, I've always used Remo, so I write the drum dial number in the Remo crown. So I'd have 3 numbers in there. The first 2 numbers would be the date. The last number would be the tension using the drum dial. So I started really using that, and then I kind of came across the idea of like, I think the actual drum shell tone sounds the best for the bottom head. So then the second part of that is so working for all these artists, I was very meticulous, and then for my band, it's just so rushed. Like none of that stuff applies. Like I kind of still tune the bottom head as best as I can, but everything's done by ear. I don't bring a drum dial with me on tour. I do actually really love the product. I don't have time. I wear many hats in my band. I'm the production manager, pretty much 50% tour manager. I do all the driving, setting up the stage, knocking the stage down. So it's like by the time I get everything up and running, to be perfectly honest, I just did 16 shows in my band. I think I tuned my drums like twice the entire tour. Like I don't even, pretty much what they start at is what they will finish at. So.
And that's why if you don't have time to tune your drums, buy some Big Fat Snare Drum products. And even though you should still know how to tune your drums, let's be honest, they do make your drums sound good if you can't tune your toms in time. So
I agree with that. Yeah, it really does save me, on quite a few occasions to just have especially the rings. I've been using the Eclipse rings, which are felt lined Mylar rings, and they really they work. I mean, it's amazing if I really had a tune and get my tom sounding decent, it'd be a lot more work than I have been putting in.
So the top head, you said that you kind of just find that the drum has a sweet spot. Is that based off feel, or you're saying as you're hitting it, the drum kind of becomes a note and you're like, that's the sweet spot? Is it off tone or off feel, I guess is the question.
I think for me, it's probably like a 50-50 on that, I think it's just I've been playing for so long and I've experienced being on the tech side and on the playing side is I kind of master more the feel first, and then I can fine tune it. I can like feng shui it, for lack of a better term, for the tone. I think the feels first and then maybe the tone second. I know once again people are probably going to scream at me for that and saying I don't know what I'm doing at all, but that's just how I figured out my tuning. And I think it was the same way. I think when I was working for other artists, I think it's for me, it's also finding their feel first, what they like and how they like the response of the heads, and then I kind of fine tune in the tone secondly. It's actually, weirdly enough, it's the same way with guitar players too. Like I never realized this because I teched an entire band. I didn't tech just drums. I've always teched full bands, and so even just like even tuning a guitar, there's a feel that the guitar player has the way they pluck the strings for the tuner. Some people pluck pretty heavy, to tune. Some people pluck very, very light. And I had to like kind of mimic that hand motion the way I tune the guitar, because I would tune a guitar the way I would normally tune it. I'd hand it to the guitar player, and then before the first song is they're going through, they're looking down, tuning. The guitar's in tune, but it's not in tune to the way they feel it's in tune. And I think it's the same way with drums too, you know? I think a lot of it's, especially being a tech and on the tuning side of things, a lot of it's like psychological. So if the drummer sits down, the drum kit can sound the best it's ever sounded, but the rack tom is a little too tight, and they feel like, oh, I'm going around on this fill, it just doesn't feel right.
I love that. So when you're hitting a tom, don't just go dun 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 dun. It's like, how are you going to hit it? Dung. Does it sound good when you hit it like you hit it? I love that's actually a really good perspective.
It's always interesting too, because I don't want to get too tech heavy on stuff, but you know, I played drums for many, many years before I teched. You know, I think it's a preconceived notion that like, oh, I know how to set up a drum kit, I know how to tune a drum kit, I can be a tech. No. I basically, you know, the fake it till you make it vibe, and I was just on YouTube videos and figuring out how to tech for a band. I was in a really tight financial position when I lived in California, and I just needed a job, and just kind of said yes, I could do a million things, and just learned as I went. And yeah, being a tech and working for somebody else is a completely different thing than being your own tech. But I think it's cool to be on that perspective and then come back and apply some of the things you've learned onto your own situation. I've done some really bizarre things too through the years. I've also tuned, I guess kind of going against everything I was just saying, but initially when I first started working for some drummers, I was actually tuning the drums with a microphone and a Peterson guitar tuner. So I was finding, before I really started diving into the drum dial, I was using a microphone and getting the actual like note of the drum and tuning that way, and tuning every lug. The only issue you run into with that is that the stage has to be completely quiet.
So you would put a microphone and that would feed into a tuner, and you would just tune it to A till everything was basically, it wasn't going crazy around A.
Yeah.
That's wild.
That's what I would do also, yeah. That works really, really well. I know. That works really, really well in the studio. In the studio situation, that's actually really, really good. You're like, especially for toms, you can get them to really, really sing nicely. If you figure out the note of the tom, figure out the note you want to go for, and then get every lug perfectly in tune. You know, at that point, it's all right. Is it tension? Is it a note? I don't know. Whatever. There's a million different ideas behind it. But if you really get that note, that drum will sing. So it's just literally a microphone with an XLR or a 1/4-inch cable into a Boss tuner, into a Peterson tuner. Yeah, it's pretty wild.
I really like the perspective of the drum kind of knows where it wants to be and where it wants to go, and it has like a range where it operates at. So I'm curious if you have ever teched for somebody where the drum, like they wanted the drum to be in a place that the drum didn't want to be in.
Yes. When I worked for Josh, we had the kit that he was, Josh Day, what I was speaking about before. I don't know if all these segments make it into the same episode, so I guess I'll re-reference him. So I worked for Josh Day for many years. He was drumming for Sarah Bareilles. I guess this is in the mid-2000s, and he had, I want to say it was a 13, 14, 16, and he really wanted that 14 to sound like a 16, and no matter what we did, it just never would. The thing was barely on. I mean, the lugs were like finger tight, and just we tried every trick, and it just, it is what it is. It's like, do 16, 18. Yeah, it just wouldn't do what we wanted it to do, and I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying. Yeah, the drums do what they want to do, you know, and I think also, sorry to just keep going on about this topic, but I think that's the difference why people pick different manufacturers, different wood, different sizes. I mean, if that wasn't true, then you could buy one drum and it could sound like everything.
Do you guys ever have this where a drum, it just throughout the years, you've never changed that tom head because you're like, wherever that drum is, I don't want it to move. And you don't necessarily remember being meticulous to find the perfect spot, but over the years, the drum has just osmosis into this. It's created what it wants to be. Whether you tune it a certain way or not, it just is what it is. And same with snares. There was a Pearl Sensitone, the aluminum Elite. It's basically the beaded shell that when the patent for the Superphonic ran out, Tama, Pearl, they all started making their version of the Superphonic. And this is the aluminum one, so it's the 10-lug version of the Acrolite, which is the same shell. Anyways, it's like a $150 snare. It's really great. Even though I'm a Rogers artist, Pearl Sensitone Elite, great line. I didn't change the head on that for like 2 years, and I just was like, oh, let me get a new head because that's what you're supposed to do, and I have not made it back to where I wanted it to be from where it was before. It's still a great snare, but I wish I would have never switched the head on that thing because it just tuned itself into this little beautiful baby.
I was gonna say, I wonder if there's like a science to like drum heads where they sort of like train themselves like you train like coiling a cable, where if you tune it at a certain point and like let it settle, it'll just kind of resolve itself in a good place where it always is just kind of where you want it to be generally. Like I wonder if there's something to that. I can see it.
I don't change my heads very often at all. You know, I know there's kind of a trend, I guess, online of people changing drum heads and, you know, needing the newest, cleanest version of a drum head. But I mean, I've gone years without changing heads and like full tours. Like I think I brought, for the last tour I just did, I brought new heads to change like midway through because we had, you know, some like higher profile shows going on like the second half of the tour. I never even got to it. And I was like, I'll change them before our big New York show. No, I never did. The heads are probably 4 years old on that kit. And they sound fine. And I think what you're both saying, I think it just settles. I think maybe it's the I don't know what it does. It's AI.
All right, this next one is a tricky one. This is a saucy one. You don't need to put a button on the end of every live song. Dude, I was thinking about it because I made this little list a few days ago to get ready for this, and I've played 2 shows since I wrote it on the list. I've tried to not, even if I do kind of like a tap with the cymbal at the end of it, no one hears except me. There has to be some sort of song is done.
Just to clarify.
Yeah, I guess we should clarify what a button is.
The button is the last note, like after like a trash can ending. Is that what I'm assuming we're talking about?
I guess that's how I like a da, boom. Like something to...
that? Okay.
Well, maybe it is even the da, bump. Anything that isn't just a washout, so you can't just let the song settle. You have to do something.
Yeah. I always call it a stinger, but a button works.
Stinger.
I will say I have noticed on a couple recent gigs I've done with sort of like new artists that I haven't played a ton with, is that I usually don't do a button. I usually let it wash out.
You're insane.
It depends on how intense the trash can ending is, or, you know, how intense the washout is.
I feel like I have to answer this in a Spinal Tap accent, but I'm not going to.
Oh God, I want to hear that.
No. I don't do that at all. I don't know. That's not like a thing for me. I think like in my brain, I just want to get out of the song as fast as possible so I don't make any mistakes and just destroy the song. So I'm just like, it's over. The track's over. I'm done. I'm out. I'm gonna just hang out.
So your final note, you're like, I fooled them again.
I'll play with whatever the record is, and that's it. See ya.
You have your button lawyer in the back. He comes out with a sheet of paper. If you sign here, he will do 6 buttons, no more than 7.
I'm gonna get you a button jar next to your drum kit. Deposit a quarter every time you play something stupid at the end.
Yeah.
I love the button jar. And then do you button the button? Do you play the last note and then do the tick-tick-go?
Well, I see that's the bow on the button. How about this one?
Okay.
The most musical drummers are often non-drummers because they can't chop or show off.
I have beef with just the term chop in general. So I'll try and put that aside. Maybe that's a separate topic.
No,
as
use
it
the
is.
beef. Use the beef.
Can you repeat the question one more time? I just want to make sure that I'm really approaching this
I think
right.
it says use the beef. No, the most musical drummers are often non-drummers because they can't chop or show off.
All right, so first off, I will say I think people who don't play drums will have really interesting musical ideas that a typical drummer might not be aware of. This has been like an interesting songwriting thing I've seen used a lot in songwriting sessions with people I've worked with. Where like I did a session recently with a dude who's a killer guitar player, but he insists on writing piano because it strips him back and to do things simpler and in ways that he wouldn't if he had, you know, his hands on a guitar. So I will say there's probably something with that. My beef with the term chops is that to me, I know what people mean when they say chops. They just mean a lot of notes. But I just think that chops are just the tools that you have to complete a gig. A lot of times we get caught trying to like say that chops aren't inherently musical when there's sometimes something that is required for the genre of music that you're playing.
I think if you're overextending your playing and you're going beyond the means of the song, then I think that's obnoxious. But if the song requires that and it's still musical, then great.
I feel like there's like this weird movement in the drum community right now where people are just like, listen, you have to be good, but you can't be too good. All right. You got to actually stop learning because we want you to play less, and so
or
just,
like you
it
learn
becomes
pocket, and then if you learn any chops, your pocket decreases. It's
exactly.
Like,
if you
no.
learn anything past pocket, it's game over.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think it's like, to me, it's you have to have as many tools in your tool belt that you can pull from, and then choosing whether to use them or not. This kind of thing to me often feels like an excuse to just not learn more tools.
Well, that's why I say it.
You're not giving yourself enough credit, man.
And I will say, too, maybe when it comes to programming, I guess, too, there's some times where I might think it sounds bad if someone sends me a demo for me to play on and the drums that they programmed are just like, what is this? But then it does give me an idea, or I guess like it opens a gateway to be like, but that is interesting. What if I channel a little bit? So
yeah, if we're
they
approaching
open
this,
different doors.
Yeah, if we're approaching this as like people who are non-drummers can contribute to the drumming writing of a song, then by all means, absolutely. Mm-hmm. But if we're approaching it as like people who are really technically, like super highly technically proficient at the drums can't be musical because they know too many things, that's where I start to lose interest. I'm like, no.
I'll ask you guys, because I've brought it up in the podcast a few times since then, but when I was talking to Mark Juliana, and he kind of yelled at me when I was, again, jokingly, about me talking about this Men in Black thing, where I wish sometimes that in certain contexts I could Men in Black my musical listening from 12 to 16, 17, because that's where so much of my instincts come from, whether I like it or not. And he was just like, that's a bad perspective. Don't have that. What's your guys' view on wanting to forget some of your instincts sometimes and all that jazz?
I would say that one regret that I did have growing up is that I didn't take the structure of drumming more serious. Mm-hmm. I kind of got sucked into the punk rock thing very early on, especially in my early band years. And so the idea was just to play as hard and fast and as fun as possible, more than like maybe I should sit down and practice with a drum pad and a metronome and maybe read some books and be more serious about lessons. I would say that's probably a regret of mine and probably has shaped some of my crutches and go-tos. I probably would have a bigger, as Eric was saying, a bigger arsenal of things to pull from if maybe I took my my studies a little more serious and maybe dug in a little bit more on the art of drumming and the craft of drumming more than just trying to slam away as hard as possible and play punk rock stuff,
To be all like therapist about it, what about what you're doing right now has suffered because you haven't, like the way you play, so there is a question in here, but like the way you play is so fun because you're so showmany about it, where you get, if people haven't seen Chris live, I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass because you're
got the moves, man.
One of my best friends and my boss, but you've created this whole persona of the way you play, and maybe it's because of this crutch you're talking about, but what if like you could have been using your words, like better drummer, maybe you wouldn't have found this awesome little spot of where your life is. You know what I mean? Like, why does having more books make you in a better situation than you would be right now?
Because I know my limitations, and I know kind of like behind the scenes I feel like as I've gotten older, I've gotten more in my head, and I have more difficulty learning parts and absorbing parts. And if somebody, my brother is a singer of our band, and if he tries to break down a fill that I'm getting incorrect, he'll just be like, oh, you need to just count it out. The fill is this, 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 this. But the second part is this, 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 and this. And my first go-to thing is just play it really fast and jerky and abrupt and out of tempo and not count it. And it sounds like garbage. And then 45 minutes later, I'm still trying to figure it out. And then we'll run the song and then I still don't get it. So I feel like if I had a better fundamental idea of music theory and more counting and applying it to drum set and just the overall practicing that I think I would be a more efficient drummer. I guess you're seeing the final product, and I think in a weird way too, all the dumb flashy stuff that I do is kind of a weird mental live crutch where I'm kind of taking myself away from maybe focusing so much on playing to the click and playing the parts and knowing in the back of my head like, oh, there's a section coming up where I can be funny and just stare at somebody in the front row and just be weird for the sake of being weird, to kind of take my brain off of a part that I know is coming up that I might blow that fill. Yeah. So, you know.
I was actually going to say, ironically, I feel the opposite to Chris. I feel like I went
what the hell
too far in the super nerdy study version, and I wish I learned to appreciate pop music and punk rock music sooner. Like I talked in the last episode about how when I was like a high school kid, I was this insufferable elitist where Dream Theater was the only good music and that was it. And then now I play in a pop band and tour with pop punk bands, and like that's what I love to listen to. And I kind of went a backwards way of learning to appreciate the song from like an aerial perspective, and kind of caught myself focusing too much on the smaller details. It was harder for me to zoom out and see the bigger picture of like the music I was playing.
Should we Freaky Friday? We should Freaky Friday it.
Yeah, dude. Just
There's got to be, I mean, there's a balance for sure, right?
For sure. We've probably come around the opposite end in our own ways and found that middle ground, right?
Oh, no, I definitely have not gotten better. I've gotten worse as I've gotten older.
I don't believe it.
Oh, it's definitely true. Well, I mean, I don't really practice. That's the real shame, is I'm just so busy with just everything going on. My practicing suffers. And actually, this is the first time, this past tour for us was the first time. It was a real like mind-opening experience for me, because I've always told, like my wife especially, you know, it's like, oh, it's like riding a bike playing drums for me. You know, I could take like a few months off of playing. Like I won't play for a few months, like at all. Maybe I'll turn on like my electronic kit and play like a Newfound Glory song for 3 minutes, get bored, go back to work. But this past time, I didn't practice at all. And then leading up to rehearsals, I spent a couple of days learning the songs than actually practicing, getting back to doing anything behind the kit. And I got into rehearsal, and this was one of the first times where like it really suffered. It was actually really bad. Like just my groove wasn't there, when that always just kind of came back pretty naturally. And then my feel was kind of weird, and yeah, like I said, I was having some real issues, like learning some parts, some pretty crucial fills throughout the songs I was having a hard time with. So I think I need to like self-correct and really hold myself accountable for going back and practicing again, and maybe getting back down to some of the core rudiments and core just playing, you know, just getting back on a kit and playing again. So
I will say, going back to your initial point about the music theory, I do think that is, like when I'm talking to my students, a lot of my technique stuff I'm talking about, I will like preface with, hey, this is how I do it. My hands, my arms, they're all different. But when it comes to music theory, I think that's so important, even just basic music theory, because like you were saying, it was hard to communicate with people. And as long as you can be like, oh, the of 4 is right here, as long as you know what that means, it'll save you so much more time. Because if you can't speak music theory, having someone have a hit on the of 3, that's so esoteric and it's hard to grasp that, you know. But if it's on the grid, oh, that's where it is, you know. So I think everyone should do that. And people that say, I don't need music theory, I just go off feel, sure. Then try and communicate with other musicians and try and get a practice to go efficiently.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm actually suffering from that right now, so it's pretty bad.
Well, you're talking to two educators, so you know we'll put. Hey, Chris, I'll make a big fat snare drum discount code that you can use on Eric's website.
Thanks.
All right, Future Ben here, telling you that this is the end of part 1 of this discussion. Hope you enjoyed it. We just ended up talking forever, and so I divided it into 2 episodes. Big Fat 5 will be back next week. See you then for part 2. or see you some other time. See you in 2 weeks for part 2. I won't see you. You'll listen to me. Bye.